Hello and welcome back to Ycft. Today I think is a bit of a special one. But before I announce what it is, don't look at the set dress. We need to be black and white. Our third black and white film of the year. This film we're going to talk about turns 100 years old.
Yes.
Can we just sit and think about that for a second?
100 years.
We're in the position where we can easily access a piece of media that is 100 years old, that it has survived. And as we go into it, it was difficult for it to do so.
Yeah.
We are talking about Nosferatu, a symphony of horror.
Yes.
Got that right? I was just new at Nosferatu.
Symphony.
I didn't realize it had symphony of horror.
Symphony of horror.
That film turns 100 years old. Came out in 1922.
Yep.
It's a German-made expressionist film. And my God, I'd seen it before we decided to do this one, but it's been a long time since I sat and gave it a rewatch. Obviously, it's a silent film. It's still pretty effective in a lot of parts. Like the makeup on
does work.
Max Shrek.
Yes.
You told me that Shrek literally his last name literally translates to ugly, doesn't it, or something like that? Fright, and that's why they used it with Shrek.
Yes.
He plays Count Orlok.
Orlok.
I wanted to go Olaf.
No.
I was instantly thinking to Stephen's Unfortunate. Count Orlok. Pretty famous looking design of him.
Yep.
And is quite famously a adaptation of Dracula.
An unofficial
adaptation. That led to some trouble. So do
Yes.
you want to tell me a little bit about, tell the masses a little bit about this little unknown film.
All right. Well, I think first, I just want to chat a little bit about German expressionist horror as a rule, and then with that, a little bit of context as to Germany at the time. So, German expressionist horror, its main influence was the traumatic aftermath of World War I. Germany took quite the battering in the aftermath. And in 1916, the German government actually banned foreign films, which spurred on a lot of domestic film production. Germany ended up becoming quite a big player on the international film production market, and especially in the aftermath of World War I, when anti-German sentiment began to fade. And by the time we get into the 1920s, the early 20s...
The Roaring Twenties.
The Roaring Twenties, yes. People wanted to forget the atrocities of the war. And the plots of German expressionist films, they usually focused around madness or insanity, but they were very much anti-realism. So lots of distorted angles, lots of stark contrast with shadows and lighting. It very much kind of like its own very visual... almost like noir in a way. It's sort of hard to describe the themes, but when you actually look at it, you know what you're seeing. So Nosferatu was directed by a guy called F.W. Murnau. He had done a few films prior to this, but Nosferatu ultimately became like his biggest one, unfortunately, pretty much after the guy had died, which only was 2 years after this. And yeah, Nosferatu was made in 1922, only 4 years after the end of World War I. Just for context, only 4 years after.
And the production on this film is pretty incredible.
Yes.
It's for the time, get real ships coming into the port. The castle they used wasn't a matte painting, it was a real place. What, Slovakia?
Yes, a lot of it was filmed in Slovakia. Yeah. And the Nosferatu castle, I believe, it's still there. You can still go. It was built in the 13th century.
Tours.
And you can do tours.
That is pretty incredible, because the setting alone...
It's on my bucket list now.
Yeah, it's absolutely on my bucket list. And so when this film came out, the basic premise is the same as Dracula. It's changed a couple of names around. But this film look, we're spoiling it. It's 100 years old, guys.
Film that's very easily accessible now. Yes, we are spoiling it.
It's still a loose adaptation.
Yes.
But it actually introduces a couple of firsts. We watched something recently that said that there might have been a few other Dracula adaptations prior to this in Russia or something like that, but they have been confirmed, but you can't find. But this is
find them. There's very
is still regarded as one of the first true vampire films. He has fangs, which Dracula does not. In the book, they're fronted. He's almost more like, there's a lot of connotation between him and the plague, and he's almost more rat-like than bat-like.
Yes, the pointy ears and the pointy teeth.
Rats tend to follow him wherever he goes.
Yes.
Vampire being killed by sunlight. This is the first time that was depicted.
Ever. Ever.
So one of the most famous traits of a vampire isn't actually from Dracula.
I think it could be a case of people maybe misremembering the novel, or because the whole sunlight thing, the kill by sunlight thing, is so synonymous with Dracula and with vampirism that people just assume it is in the book.
Yeah, he's
It's
weakened
not.
by sunlight, but it doesn't kill him.
No, there are scenes in the book where he is walking around in daylight. His powers are significantly reduced, but he can freely walk around in the daytime. Nosferatu, the film, firmly plants this idea that no, sunlight kills vampires.
Yeah.
Count Orlok, he also doesn't kill people by turning them into vampires or have any desire to turn them into vampires.
Yeah.
It's just more the need to suck their blood.
Yeah.
So there are a few things that they do differently, but it does basically follow the plot.
Yeah.
We have the Harker-like character, we have the Mean-like character,
Yeah,
Dr.
like
Seward,
estate agents.
Yes.
Yeah, all that.
Renfield.
We could, everyone knows this
Yes.
tale. But this, Bram Stoker's widow was not a fan.
Florence was not a fan of this film.
No.
She was significantly pissed off. Like, they had the audacity to rip off her dead husband's book, and she fought tooth and nail to get every single copy of this film burnt.
Yeah, she took them to court.
She
Even though
did.
it's just, the director described this as a German film for German people.
Yeah.
Yeah, the court ordered every copy of this film to be destroyed.
Yeah. Flo got $5,000 in the process as well.
Which is quite a lot back then.
Yeah.
And Germany didn't have that much money.
No,
back
they
then.
did not. Also, the film production company that produced this movie, it's the only film they did because they very quickly went into liquidation afterwards.
I wonder why.
So they could barely even afford to pay out what they needed for Florence.
Clearly the film survived. A few copies did survive.
A few copies.
You can tell when you watch it that there have been various versions of the film that they've taken to try and reconstruct it. You can't actually hear the original score for it. It's been various other composers doing an interpretation of it, but the original score was completely lost.
Yes.
In the 1930s, I believe there was an unofficial re-edit.
There was a reconstructed version.
It was I think they filmed additional scenes for it.
They did, yeah. It wasn't even called Nosferatu when it was re-released. It was called The 12th Hour, A Night of Horror. So they used footage from the original movie. They also managed to get hold of deleted scenes from Nosferatu, which they incorporated, and they also made some new material as well. So it was very much they Frankensteined it, basically. It was just a mishmash of different scenes and different parts from different films put together. But yeah, that was released in 1930.
Yeah.
Equally hard to get hold of.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much impossible to get hold of that one.
Yeah.
But when you watch it now, there's colorized versions. Like the versions that you get are very much the varying quality and various tints. The film has been... It's kind of a miracle that this film is still around.
It is, really, when you think about
and
it.
As just the power of cinema is there were people who hid this film
because they knew it was something special.
Because they knew it was something special and later on the paper that it needs to be destroyed. And obviously, like I said, the film has survived, and there was a remake in the 1970s.
There's been quite a few, if not outright remakes, then homages to Nosferatu. So yeah, we had the weird constructed version in 1930. Then we fast forward to 1979, and Werner Herzog, he made his remake of the movie, which it's not quite shot for shot, but it is definitely a remake, and it stars Klaus Kinski as Orlok. Prior to that, though, in 1974, we get a bit of a homage to Orlok's character in Salem's Lot.
Yeah, which originally, we are planning a Salem's Lot video next year.
Yeah.
We are.
It's also being remade.
Because that's being remade, we have the Blu-ray of the original. I am deep into the book, the audio book.
Yeah.
You're deep into a foreign book that I bought you by accident. We'll get into that in the video.
Spanish.
But originally, the vampire in that was meant to be more Dracula-like, more human.
Yes.
But for the TV movie, they changed him to be more of a Nosferatu-like one. And Stephen King actually was skeptical, but actually really liked that.
Yeah.
And the look of him is pretty incredible.
It is. I think it looks great. It was a good decision, ultimately, I think. It served it well. And then we've had a few, again, homages, I guess, to it in between. In 2000, we get the brilliant film Shadow of the Vampire, which was this kind of metafictional film about the making of Nosferatu, which posits that Max Schreck was actually a real vampire.
By Willem Dafoe.
Yeah, And John Malkovich plays Murnau, the director, who's just maniacally trying to get his film made, and he doesn't care that he's hired an actual vampire in the role.
I really want to watch this.
It's so good. Willem Dafoe famously plays Orlok. And then in 2014, What We Do in the Shadows, we get the Peter character.
Peter,
who obviously resembles Nosferatu, Count Orlok.
Yeah. I still think that the Hotel Transylvania franchise, in the second one, Count Drac's dad looks significantly more like Nosferatu.
Yeah. And then...
Even like going into like the Underworld films, like Underworld Evolution, you have Marcus, who's maybe the first vampire, and yeah, he has wings and he's slightly more bat-like, but his look is definitely more inspired by Nosferatu than Dracula.
Yes. And then now, 2022, we have another remake in the works, which Robert Eggers is directing and penning, famous for The Lighthouse. Famous
Bill
for...
Skarsgård is going to be in it.
Bill Skarsgård
Anya
is going to be in
Taylor-Joy?
it.
No,
it's just
Lily Rose Depp.
Lily Rose Depp.
Taylor-Joy, she is rumoured to be part in it some way. Because this one's had a weird production because he for a while he thought it just wasn't good. He was working on it for years and thought it wasn't going to get made, and now they have actually started filming.
Yeah.
I am fascinated. But you've missed an interpreted one.
Which one?
The 2014 one that still isn't out yet. The crowdfunded one.
Oh.
Which was to star... This was more of a... I can't remember the name of the director. I have to try and find him. He did this for a previous film as well, where they're going to remake it using green screen and blue screen technology, refilm a lot of the scenes, but use some of the original inserts wherever they can. Basically, just do a modern day reconstruction of the film. And it was going to star Doug Jones as Nosferatu. And that it did get its funding, and I think it is still in the works, but this is one of the ones. It's a passion project, and it's going to be a long process, but I think pandemic set that back a bit, but I think they did film something for it.
Yeah.
And we might get that someday, which would be
that
will pretty much be a shot-for-shot remake of the original film.
Interesting.
I'm weirdly more interested in that, because I think Doug Jones has the body to play, like I can imagine him with the claws and the legs, I think he made a great one, but we know Robert, if he does it, it has to be black and white.
I hope
like he did with The Lighthouse. Can you imagine if he made it in the style he did The Lighthouse?
Yeah.
It could be... But you know it's going to be... Obviously, we saw The Northman in cinema. His stuff's weird.
Robert Eggers is a strange director.
Yeah.
His
but
films are very much not for everyone.
Yeah.
Let's just put it that way.
But I do love his stuff.
Yes.
Because I know I'm going to be in for none of his stuff is ever boring.
Well, I don't think he's ever just outright... He's not borrowed from previous material before, as far as I know.
The Northman is based on a book.
Oh, it is based on a book.
There is a book. Well, a folklore.
Yeah.
So...
Yeah. But, with this, it would be a return to supernatural horror. And, he's never tackled vampires before. So,
no, he's done witches.
Done witches, but yeah.
Witches and the devil. Yeah, I'm very curious about that. So it kind of shows that this film still has an influence today.
Oh,
but there's actually not really been that many incarnations of the film when you think about it.
No. I guess Orlok's legacy and what the film did for vampire mythology has passed down. And the legacy is undeniably strong. But yeah, there's not been a lot of outright remakes of
interesting, I think, especially from the mid-2000s onwards, vampires are always perceived as more monstrous. It's been a long time since... If we go back to the 90s with the Bram Stoker's Dracula, he's still very romanticized. He's a little bit monstrous.
Yes.
But he's more, very much romantic.
Yes.
We've never really had that since. And vampires have sort of become, like I said, monsters. And they actually have more in common with Nosferatu and Count Orlok than they do with Count Dracula.
Yeah, that's true.
It's like the two have now become... Obviously, he was inspired by Dracula, but he is a completely different character. But now they are two basically one and the same.
Yeah.
It's had more... the Stoker estate failed to get rid of this film. Mm. And now it's part of the zeitgeist. We can't get rid of it. Even if people haven't seen the film, they know Nosferatu. They know the look of him.
Yes. It's iconic. It's totally iconic.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because when you think about, the more kind of romantic element that the character basically took on, the Dracula character, I suppose you could argue it's maybe introduced in Nosferatu. The connection that Orlok develops with Ellen.
Yeah.
That psychic connection and how he, stares out the window.
He basically travels across the world to get to her.
He wants that neck. And the way he kind of stares at her out the window and just stands there
Some
all
parts
day
are still
watching her. And then the scene, the penetration scene at the end, we find, spoiler, bites her neck. She's in her bed.
Yeah.
You know, she's in her bed. It's very much like
It's
a
very much
weird
described as
consummation of this
they spend the
fucked up
night together.
relationship. They literally do. And then in an article we read in this brilliant, in the Dark Side magazines, they also kind of posited the idea because her husband, Hutter, who is, for all intents and purposes, the Jonathan Harker-like character, he's a bit of a wet lettuce.
So is she.
So is she.
She's one of those irritating parts of this film.
But Hutter, especially, he is not... This is probably very un-PC to say, but he's not a manly man. You know, like, he's not... when he cowers in fear, when Nosferatu, Orlok enters his bedroom in the castle, his whole thing is to hide under the covers like a child. You know, he's very childlike. There's something very innocent to him.
I think it's like there's a way that the silent films are done, very stage-like.
I get it. I totally get it. But I mean, the article also suggests that because there is such an innocence and a childlike quality to these characters, but also in their relationship, it's not maybe a stretch to suggest that they're not physically intimate with each other. You know, maybe they haven't consummated the marriage.
We thought this when we watched.
We did.
Watched it, yeah.
But
because there's a lot of theories that
Orlok gets her in her bed.
Yeah, I think because it's obviously the way it's been filmed, like there's some shots that might have been day for night at some point.
Yes, definitely.
But it very much looks like Orlok is walking around in the sunlight most of the time, and it's theorized that because even she reads it in the book that if he drinks her blood, the blood of someone so pure, he will then become vulnerable.
Yes.
So again, it's hard to really know, but so from what I get is because if they haven't consummated their marriage and she is so childlike and pure, that is what kills him.
That's potentially what kills him.
Which is also the polar opposite to Dracula.
Yeah. Yes.
Which is fascinating.
It is.
So it's like it's one of those things that the story beats are the same, but he is not the same character. And I think if it went to court today, I feel like the film might at least not be destroyed.
Yes. Did not deserve that. Absolutely.
Can I say
not.
the cinematography in this film, in part, is incredible.
It is. It really,
everyone
really
knows
is.
the iconic shot of him going up the stairs.
Yeah, which
and I showed you a McFly video,
5 minutes of the
music
film.
video afterwards called Transylvania, where they pay homage to it. That was really interesting.
Well, it's so
but
famous.
that shot is probably one of the most. His fingers extending to the door. It's probably one of the most famous shots of all time. But there's other shots in this film where I'm like, this looks amazing.
Yeah, I totally agree. The whole the sequences on the ship look stunning.
In his castle as well.
Yeah, the way that
I love it when he's carrying his coffin through the town.
Oh, it's great. It's great.
I know obviously the story of him going across Europe to reach the not Nina character. What's her name?
Ellen.
It's Nina. It's basically Nina.
Yeah.
Then there's reports of plagues, and then there's the plague, the fear. Obviously, not long after the Spanish flu, I think was around.
The Spanish flu, it would have just probably been finishing around that time.
Yeah, so obviously that must have been a big inspiration, even with the look of him, because he kind of just almost looked like a plague victim.
It was kind of eerie.
But obviously he's feasting on his way across Europe.
He basically is. But we had a little moment where there's the town, what was it called, the criers going through. It's like everyone stay inside, shut your
it's
doors.
a bit close to home.
We just kind of looked at each other like. 100 years on.
It's that conspiracy theory, isn't it? That we get a world-ending disease or plague every 100 years, and it's like, yeah,
that tracks. Yeah,
that tracks.
Yeah, but I personally, I have a big interest in silent films. It was sort of sparked by a big obsession I had with Charlie Chaplin many years ago. It's never really gone away, but there was a significant phase where I specifically was just consuming lots of silent movies, a lot of comedies. And even the comedies, they can be a little bit spooky.
Yeah.
And I've always tried to put my finger on what exactly it is. And I don't think it's one thing in particular. I think it's a mixture of the makeup that the actors have to wear, the bright white face and the dark eyeshadow and the dark...
Just the way cameras were and film was.
I also think that there's something to the fact that, people just kind of looked a bit differently back then.
Dressed differently, they acted differently.
Dressed differently, they acted differently, but also just facially. They looked a lot older than what they actually were. I don't know. To me, that's...
War-torn Europe.
War-torn Europe, yeah, just generally. Everyone's aged 20 years.
I always think when watching this, I was like, it's difficult to recommend a silent film. I think you have to know your friend is a particular type of person to recommend a silent film to it.
Yeah.
But one of the things I strangely most enjoyed, obviously there's no dialogue, but you have dialogue cards.
Yes.
That's top 10. I loved just reading the cards in accents, as if I was in a stage production, just out loud. That was really fun for me.
It was fun. It was a lot of fun. Yeah.
It's like, It wouldn't even surprise me if Robert Eggers makes his Nosferatu a silent movie.
It would. Oh, do you know what? It wouldn't. It wouldn't surprise me actually either.
Yeah, like The Pianist was a silent movie, wasn't it?
Yeah. No, The Artist.
The Artist.
The
Pianist
Artist
is a
is
different
silent.
film. Yeah, it would not surprise me if he makes it a silent film.
Yeah. There are some scenes in this that still kind of they get me. Like I'm still thinking about it.
It sticks with you, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. And again, it's a lot to do with there's something the exaggerated, very unnatural movements of the actors. Like sometimes the camera, speeds up and like no one runs like that, no one walks like that. It's very
your frame rate very much depends on who's cranking it.
Who's cranking that camera? Yeah, and the very jerky movements.
Some of the shots have obviously been rescanned, maybe brought up to a higher frame. It all depends on the quality of certain parts.
Yeah.
There's some bits that were degraded to the point where you could barely see what was going on.
Yeah.
Which I think is like the point behind that one where they're trying to recreate it as faithfully as possible so we can still experience it.
There's one scene in particular that always kind of spooks me out is when Harker, he's called Hutter, when he's trekking along to the castle because the original coachman, will say, I don't go any further, like you've got to walk from here. And then another coach comes by, driven by Orlok, but he's got the cloak wrapped around him and everything. And the coach just speeds along almost maniacally, and this like horrible cloaked figure driving it, and you can just see the darkness of his eyes, and you can see his hooked nose almost peeking out. There's just something so eerie about it, and it's just the way the coach just like speeds right off. It's just, I don't know, it's spooky.
Yeah, it's a spooky film.
It is a spooky film.
I just love that it still survived, and it's baffling me that in our lifetime now we are going to be able to see a lot more films turning 100.
Yeah.
And they're going to be even easier to access. Like, we could be talking about Bride of Frankenstein again in 20 years' time as that turns 100.
Yeah.
And
it's insane.
It's pretty incredible.
There's something insane to me as well about watching a film where literally everybody on screen and behind the scenes are dead. Like, obviously no shit, it's 100 years old, but there's just something also like in the back of my mind watching it like, my God, we are literally watching a piece of history. Not one of these people is still alive.
Yeah.
And then
but this film has survived.
It survived.
Against all the odds, this film has survived.
It's survived history. It's timeless. Like, it's working its way through generations.
Now, it can't be forgotten. By this point now, it can't be forgotten.
Yeah. But it's also like, obviously now, we watch a film, we like it, it gets released in the cinema, we can go on the internet, we can research it, we can find out trivia, we can watch the making of it. Hell, we can watch blooper reels, we can see, where they fucked up their lines or whatever. We don't get any of that with Nosferatu. Like, there's no making of it. There's very little trivia about, the behind the scenes of this movie.
Yeah.
There's something still profoundly mysterious about it. Like, yeah, we know a lot, but we also don't know nearly enough about it.
You liked how I described Shadow of the Vampire Diet. There's no behind the scenes of this film, so we're going to make a film that is the behind the scenes of this film.
I love that. Yeah, I never thought of Shadow of the Vampire that way. It's like it's the making of the Nosferatu. It's the we needed to fill that void. Yeah, Shadow of the Vampire fulfills that. But yeah, it's something that I wondered as well when we were watching it. Is again, obviously Nosferatu is 100 years old. Films do not look like this now. Like, we don't get silent movies. We have much better equipment. We have a much more natural acting style. Obviously, we've got sound. Films just aren't made like this anymore. But I asked you, 100 years from now, realistically, how different a film's going to be. Films made in 100 years, the fashion is probably going to change, the technology is probably going to change.
The stories might change.
But I don't think we'll see a big difference in acting. I don't think we'll see a big difference in themes being explored. And physically, aesthetically, I don't think films are going to be too different.
No.
In 100 years' time. We won't see as stark a difference as a film from 1922.
Bear in mind, like, film was still a relatively new thing back then.
Absolutely. Yeah. But there's something also, like, you then question, you mentioned, like, how far can we push film? Like, a lot of stories are already being recycled and a lot of technology. Yeah, we get new technology, but fundamentally, can it really change?
Well, they say now that
much?
all stories have actually been told. Everything else is just reinterpretation of previous stories.
Of an old story, yeah. I don't know, I just, like, that to me this is a really interesting film to watch, and it is an effective horror film, but it's equally just very, I don't know, like, you can go off on so many tangents thinking about it. you know, like its place in history and like, you know, our relationship to film today.
Or even just how it inspired. Literally, it's like almost like the plague that follows Nosferatu.
Yeah.
That plague has latched itself on to the legacy of Dracula and is
Yeah.
now indistinguishable from it.
Yeah. I also love how that Max Schreck himself has a bit of a reputation because, again, not really a lot is known about the guy. But
he also died quite not long after. So was it in the 30s, I think he died?
Not too long after, yeah. I mean, he didn't really ever get to see the success of the film, I don't think, if it was pulled so quick. Yeah. None of them did. None of them did, and there's something really sad about that. But yeah, people say that Shrek was a bit of a method actor, and generally a bit of an odd, quirky character. And the director apparently said at one point that, you know, obviously, yeah, he's got lots of makeup on and everything, but really he didn't need to act that much. So it's just kind of intriguing, like, you know, who was this guy that played Orlok? What was he really about?
So he's quite known for just going on long walks just on his own.
Very, very solitary guy, yeah. And I can probably buy that he was a bit method and like stayed in character.
I love something I never appreciated until I watched this time is I love like the coat that he wears, just the costume of Nosferatu. Again, realistically, it's a very simple design. It's just, and we notice that like as he feeds more, his claws get longer.
Yeah, they do. I also really like something as well. The difference in Max Schreck's performance compared to basically everybody else in the film. Because again, it's a silent movie, you know, like everyone's very melodramatic.
He's very toned down.
Yeah, like there's a lot of frenzy, and then you've got Hutter, who's very, you know, animated and like a child, and, you know, all of that. Whereas Shrek is very quiet. There's a stillness. Like there's no exaggerated movements. It's just, you know, there's, again, eerie, but he contrasts so much to everybody else in the film that it just helps him stand out so much more. It's like, yeah, the makeup and the costume is great, but just the way he acts, like there's a slowness. You know, it's like almost Michael Myers-esque. Like he doesn't rush to kill anybody. He just slowly enters a room. You know, it works. Yeah. It works.
You got any more notes?
One last little bit of trivia, which just sort of freaked me out a little bit, and I just thought was apt to talk about Nosferatu. The director, F.W. Murnau. Again, he did a few films, I think before and after Nosferatu, but unfortunately he died in 1931, I think. I'm
pretty sure, I might be wrong here, I'm pretty sure Max Schreck died in 34.
Did he?
I'll put it up if I've got that wrong, but I'm like pretty sure.
So he died in a car crash. It was pretty tragic. He was not old by any means. And then I think it was in 2015, his grave was disturbed and his head had been stolen. And upon investigating, they realised that there was wax residue around his grave, and they concluded that probably some kind of occult ritual maybe had taken place, hence why the head was removed. And to this day, his head has never been found.
Morbid.
Morbid as hell.
Disturbing as hell.
Yeah.
Please give him his head back.
Please give this poor man his head back. You know, it's weird. Like, the guy's been dead longer than he ever was alive. Like, he deserves his head.
Weirdly, would understand it more if it was Max Schreck's.
Yeah, I think maybe he was cremated though or something.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not
sure. But that's. Yeah. We live in strange times.
We do.
That's recent.
Yeah. It's that's the thing with this film. It's like even the cast and the crew equally interesting to research about.
Like the Renfield type character. I can't remember the name of.
Alexander Grenache, I think.
He went on to have a really interesting career.
He did, yeah. He was German Jewish, I believe, and of course, like so many, you know.
He's fantastic in this film.
He fled when the Nazis came to power, and he ended up having a really really successful career in America. But ironically, a lot of the roles he got were Nazi soldiers.
Ironic.
There's just something very ironic about that. I hope he had a sense of humor about it.
But you know, the German expressionism. Have I got that right?
Expressionism
did massively influence like people like Hitchcock.
It did, definitely. I mean, this was like the origins of horror. Really can kind of go back to a lot of, you know, German expression, especially horror movies. You know, a lot of what we see now, it goes back to that time. You know, again, like distorted angles and this determination to do something that's unrealistic, you know, playing with light and shadows. Yeah. We of course we see that echoes today, but I mean, yeah, Billy Wilder, Hitchcock, so many other famous directors from the 50s, 60s said that German expressionist horror was a big influence on them. And then equally, you know, Hitchcock is a huge influence today. So, I mean,
Yeah.
there's
Everyone's
echoes of it.
Everyone is inspired by someone.
Exactly, yeah. Someone else's success will always sort of trickle down in various ways to today. So, yeah, it's a very interesting movie to talk about on so many levels.
It's so easy to... It baffles me when I went to HMV, I thought, I'll try and pick up the Blu-ray. And they were charging like £25 for the Blu-ray of this. It's in the public domain, this film. It is not hard to get a hold of. Like, it's on Prime for free. It's on YouTube. It's on Shudder for free.
Yeah.
This is a really accessible film. And I saw so many... Like, we saw colorized versions. A lot of people have used AI technology to try and remaster it. You can get a hold of this film really easily. And if you are interested in the history of... Not even just the history of horror, but the history of film in general.
Yeah.
Track it... Like, don't even try... Like, just search Nosferatu and you'll find it. It doesn't take any tracking down. Just give it a try. Give it a try and just...
Give
it
a whirl.
Be in awe of how far things have come. And the fact that you are watching something, like Sam said before, where no one is alive. Yeah. No one who worked on this is still alive.
Yeah.
But now...
And there they are on the screen.
And now that film, this character will never go away. Even if... Because realistically, by the time Eggerson comes out, that's 50 years since the last proper Nosferatu film.
Mm.
That's a massive gap.
Yeah. True. Also, bleak ending to the movie.
Yeah,
I think that's also something people kind of forget as well.
It is really bleak.
Yeah. Which is not something that kind of... Usually in a lot of vampire films that followed, it's... Harker does get his girl and the vampire's defeated and people can live happily ever after. There's an element of optimism. The vampire is usually defeated. Whereas in this... he dies, but I mean, there's a sacrifice that has to be made.
It's a very personal... There's not even like a vampire hunter character in this.
No, there isn't. It's also kind of ambiguous as to, where vampirism came from. Because, I mean, if it's... This film does not necessarily suggest the idea that by being bitten you become a vampire. It's more just that's how he gets his energy. That's how he gets his food. So what made him?
Yeah.
What made the first vampire? Yeah, it's interesting.
It is interesting. So...
Check it out.
Yeah. 100 years old.
Check it out. 100 years old. Happy birthday.
Yeah. Happy birthday. I'm not sure what point in the year it came out.
I think it was March, actually.
March.
Yeah.
So this year, like...
Technically, it's now over 100 years.
It's nearly 101 years old,
yeah.
which is just absolutely baffling. So thanks for dropping by, guys.
Yeah.
I hope you enjoy these black and white... I enjoy doing these black and white videos.
Spooky season.
Our third one of the year. And they receive quite well when we do them, so I'm not sure what the next one... I know I said in the Creature of the Black Lagoon I want to do the Wolfman, so maybe that one might be next.
At some point, for sure.
But that might be a versus with the 2010, which would be an...
That would be an interesting video.
That would just have to all be black and white.
Yeah.
But that would be a very interesting one. So, yeah, like I said, thanks for stopping by, guys, and we'll see you next week.